the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, my co-host Ian Rivers, and Ian, another great day to be a Beaver. Not too much going on the spring sports front. Some games going on here and there, but nothing too big to report on. So we're going to kind of bounce around a little bit because it doesn't really feel like spring right now outside anyways. So Ian, let's talk hockey. And what do you got for us?
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the CCHA awards that have been dropping over the last couple of days. I don't know why they choose to do it like this. Like, oh yeah, here's the all rookie team, and then tomorrow's going to be the rest of the team awards, and then the next day you'll get the individual awards. The Big Ten, they just did it all at once, which was kind of nice. But either way, I guess we'll run through them real quick. The all CCHA, all rookie team, I should say. About what we expected. Kyle Kukkonen, Joey Larson, our boy Leighton Road, and then defenseman Dalton Norris, Josh Singer, and goaltender Benny Halaz. I know there's a lot of Maverick fans that are upset about Fitzgerald, Christian Fitzgerald, who did not get a nod. I probably would have given it to him over Larson, but there's four guys there that were really qualified for that award. So I don't think anybody's complaining too much other than Mavs fans, obviously. For those three being picked on the forward lines. So good for Leighton to get picked on that team. The all second team, Matthias Scholl was named to the all second team in the CCHA, which I don't know. It was a little bit surprising. I mean, I guess it was a little bit of a down year in the CCHA for goaltending play, for anybody not named Pietila, I guess. But yeah, he didn't play terribly, but he didn't, stand out and go above and beyond, I didn't think. But with only 8 other goaltenders, well, there's more than that. There's more than 8 other goaltenders that are getting minutes. Some split time, but so good for Matthias Scholl. He's definitely talented enough to earn that. And then on the first team, you had Elias Rosen along with Jake Livingstone on the back line, Blake Pietila, of course, in net, and then Austin Swankler, Ryland Mosley, and David Cilia on the all CCHA first team. So third time in his career that Elias Rosen has been named to the CCHA first team. That's pretty good, in his long distinguished career. You wish it would have come with a little bit more on ice success to kind of pair with that, but you know what? I mean, this year, anyways, he obviously has been around for some good years of Beaver hockey, but anyways, this year it wasn't necessarily his. And then getting into the individual awards, a couple of snubs for the Beavers, we think. Leighton Road did not get named rookie of the year. That was to Kyle Kukkonen, and I have to believe that there was a little bit of recency bias going in there. I have to believe it. He played really well over the last couple of weeks of the year, including that super dramatic, final couple games of the year in Mankato. But it's not like he didn't deserve it. It'd be a different story if he just completely didn't deserve it, and Leighton got snubbed because of that. But I would have liked to see our boy win it. And then defenseman of the year went to Jake Livingstone. Of course, again, that's what I predicted would happen. But I would have liked to see Rosen get the nod there. But either way, Blake Pietila won goaltender of the year, no shocker, and David Cilia won forward of the year in the conference. So that's kind of a rundown on the awards. Nothing too shocking standing out to me. I think it was St. Thomas that got completely snubbed from all the team awards. They should have been, I believe, the only team that didn't get anybody. Lake Superior State had Louis Bedone on the second team, all CCHA, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, nothing too shocking. Beavers got a couple nods in there, and I'm sure that we have probably a couple of second place finishers in some of those team or individual awards too, because I'm sure if Leighton or if Matthias Scholl was all CCHA second team, he probably finished second in the goaltender voting, but that was probably a little bit more of a wide margin than Leighton Road and Elias Rosen had in their awards, I'm sure. But yeah, like I said, good for the Beavers to get a couple of nods in there, and hopefully Leighton Road sticks around and can continue to push forward on getting plenty of future awards.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at this list, like you said, there's not really anything that comes as too big of a surprise. I know Road not, getting that honor is a little, like you said, it's a little shocking, but at the same time, like there's a logical case for it. But I mean, I think it really just tells the story of Bemidji State hockey this season, in which case it is you had a couple standout guys in road and you had some, above average goaltending play this season. And outside of that, you pretty much had nothing else. Like there was some high end talent that carried the Beavers through a lot of the season. And at the same time, they didn't quite, not necessarily you need to have a bunch of guys winning awards to be successful. You want that to happen, but that's realistically not going to happen every single year. But I think it just kind of reaffirms what we know about this men's hockey team, which is that they had some talent on the ice, but ultimately not enough to really make a deep run. And in which case they were really relied on by some of that high end talent.
Yeah, I agree. It just, you look at teams every year and you say, yeah, they have some really good players on there, but especially in hockey and in most other team sports, it's important to have a solid group of guys. There's so many guys that touch the ice on a nightly basis. You got to have more than just a couple guys that are really making true deep impacts on the roster. So hopefully that will bleed into some more future success as a team. Obviously, that's what we're looking for here. Individual success is great, but at the end of the day, it's not really what a whole lot of people remember, especially at the college level, outside of like the Hobie Baker Award, which I think Pietala, by the way, shout out him, is a top 10 finalist for the Hobie Baker. So good for him. The tournament also is rolling on. We had one shock score line this weekend in the CCHA tournament. Northern Michigan 4, Michigan Tech nothing. That was
you just hate to see it.
Yeah, really you do. Minnesota State took care of Ferris State 7-2. The scoreline doesn't really look that good, but it wasn't that far of a game apart. It was 4-2 up until like halfway through the third period. Ferris State was apparently more in the game than the scoreline suggests, but Northern Michigan was up 3-0 over the Huskies in the first period. And I made a comment and said, hey, welcome to the club, Wildcats. You have now joined the distinguished two-team club of embarrassing Michigan Tech in the CCHA semifinal on their home ice. So it's a good club to be in. Good for Northern Michigan. I don't really know how to feel about it though, because now I kind of have to get my Alaska team that I want in the tournament. You probably have to cheer against the Wildcats this weekend if you want to see the Nanooks get in. But either way, I think it's a good cause. I think there's a real case, depending on what happens. You could see 3 CCHA teams in the tournament. I don't know how far Minnesota State would fall. I believe they're at 13 in the pairwise right now. You'd have to believe they fall one spot. Man, it might be actually pretty hard for Mankato to get into the tournament if Northern Michigan beats them. That would be another at-large bid taken away. We already know Atlantic Hockey is going to take a bid away. And then, say a team like North Dakota wins the NCHC tournament. That's another at-large bid that gets taken away. And that would probably drop Mankato out of the tournament. So it's going to be pretty hard to see 3 teams from our conference get in. We should have 2 for sure. I think Tech is pretty safe at this point. But that was the weird thing about this weekend. Technically, neither team moved a whole lot at all. But going into the end of the Mankato game, after Tech's loss, the way things bounced in other games, Tech went from 11 to 10 after losing 4-0 at home. And after winning 7-2, Mankato dropped from 12 to 13. So there was a lot of confused fans with how that was working, but I think it just had to do with other games going final and moving around there. But yeah, we should see two teams from the CCHA in the tournament, which is, I think, a good thing. Get some more exposure for the brand and for the conference, and then hopefully that breeds more success next year. Because that's a big thing that goes into pairwise. Like if the teams that we play at Bemidji aren't getting wins outside of the conference, it doesn't really help us look good in pairwise. So that's kind of why, you have to cheer for teams in your conference to win their out of conference games, so your pairwise looks better when you come down to beating them or losing to them in your own conference. But yeah, that's pretty much it for CCHA hockey. The Mason Cup final will be 6:07 p.m. Central Time. It's in Mankato on Saturday, so plenty to watch for there. Hopefully, Mankato's got their goal figured out. Hopefully, that thing's not going to pop off on a random,
Yeah, I was going to
Random
say no
shot down.
controversial endings this time is the hope, but you just never too sure. Ian, there's one question with Northern Michigan advancing. Does it change how we view that opening series in the CCHA playoffs for Bemidji State? Because we talked about how attainable it was for them to win. Does it say like, well, Northern Michigan was going off on their run, so like, it would have been really tough to beat them knowing how good they were now? Or is it saying like, we were right there if you're Bemidji State and you could have done the exact same thing that Northern Michigan did and have a chance to be in the CCHA playoffs and championship?
I think it's a little bit, it makes you feel a little bit better because we knew that they were hot coming in, but it was only a 4-game win streak. And of course, they blew the doors off of Ferris State 2 weeks before they played us. And then they had a good weekend against, who did they play in that second to last? Oh, it was a Bowling Green to jump us in the CCHA standings. And then, of course, they blew the doors off of us on Friday night, won a 2-1 game in overtime. And then they go in, and I think they're probably, if it's not Mankato, they're probably the hottest team in the CCHA right now. So we just put ourselves in a bad position by dropping so many points over the course of the year, where we could have avoided the Cats almost all the way up until the championship game. Like maybe we wouldn't have gotten there. Maybe we would have played Ferris State and lost in 3 games. In the first round, anyways. But we put ourselves in a situation where we had to play the hottest team, and they've got the offensive firepower. I mean, they got a first place vote in the preseason polls for a reason in the CCHA. They were the only team besides Mankato to get a vote. And they're proving right now why, because if this team would have showed up like this all season, they'd be in a lot different spot in the conference, other than basically being in 6th all season long and then going on a 4-game win streak to end the year and jumping up into the 4th spot, is basically what they were. And so I think they're proving to us right now what they can do. And I'm going to be honest. I mean, there's not a whole lot of teams that would want to play this team. I think Northern Michigan, if they beat Mankato, it's likely that they would be the 15 in the NCAA tournament. I think that they would be above whoever wins Atlantic hockey. And then depending on how things fall, if Quinnipiac wins the ECAC, that would be a really good game, because Quinnipiac, they're kind of on fraud watch. They have a championship from like 2015 or 2016 or something like that. But since then they've kind of disappointed. They're kind of like the Gonzaga. They don't play a lot of quality teams. They have Harvard and Cornell and the ECAC over there. They're pretty good, but and that's not to say the CCHA is a world-beating conference, but still, I think Northern Michigan, with their offense clicking the way it is, if they get into the tournament, they could make some noise. So that's something to monitor. But I guess we could touch on that more if they actually beat Mankato this next week. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say. I think it does make you feel a little bit better if you're the Beavers, just because we were so poor over the last couple of weeks of the year, and they were so good, and there's just not a whole lot we could do with that matchup. I think if we would have lost to anybody else outside of the top 2 in Northern Michigan, like if you lose a series to Bowling Green or Ferris State, you probably are like, oh God. I mean, they were so mediocre at the end of the season, even more so than us at times, and that would have made you feel bad. But I don't think that losing to one of the hottest teams in the league, especially with, like we talked about, we knew what we were at that point. We were not the Beavers of old. So I think it feels good to know that they're continuing on with their hot play.
Yeah. And now as we move past, is there anything else in the hockey realm, or you think we're good to roll?
I think we're good to roll, man.
Yeah, so I think now as we bounce around to some other sports here, just kind of some news and notes for Bemidji State. Let's go right into football, Ian. Bemidji State has announced their spring practice schedule, with the spring game set for April 15th, as Brent Bolte releases the spring practice schedule. March 15th, of course, the first official day of spring practice, with the annual green and white spring game at 2 p.m. on April 15th at Chet Anderson Stadium. They got 15 practices, of course, subject to change, also open to the public. So practices will range from March 15th all the way to April 29th. That pretty much coincides with the end of the school year and finals week. And then it all encapsulates into the schedule release. And we were kind of talking about this a week or two ago, Ian, about like, whenever the schedule drops, we should probably talk about that and see what it looks ahead and how this matches up for Bemidji State football as they try and make it was it 3 years in a row of advancing to the NCAA tournament. How are we looking?
Well, I'm a little bit intrigued with this bye week in here because now there's only 10 games, unless I'm completely counting wrong, but I don't think I am on the roster. So they have an October 7th bye, and I know that Bolte posted on Twitter after Upper Iowa left the conference looking for out of conference games, any coaches or something, let me know, like, because they were going to try to schedule somebody. I don't know if they just didn't get that done or if there's still a possibility to slot somebody in there. The article doesn't say whether or not it just says a bye week arrives on week 6 of that would normally have been Upper Iowa. And so it kind of makes me think that we're only going to have 10 games. I don't know how that stacks up with other teams that are potentially going to be playing 11. So but either way, I think it's an interesting schedule. It's weird. We're starting off the year with Northern State when a lot of the past seasons we've kind of ended the year with Northern State, especially the last two, at least for sure.
It's always
So
been starting in the South.
yeah, and I think this is a little bit. We talked about last year how it was such a tough game, such a tough slate to open the season up, being at home against Mankato and then going on the road to Augustana. And now you kind of get you know what, it changes from year to year. Every roster is going to be a little different, but Northern State probably not on the same level as Mankato. They have been a titch below them. You know, they're kind of in the oh man, they're almost in a league of their own where they're like more respectable than kind of those middle of the pack teams in the NSIC, but they aren't necessarily on the same level as Bemidji State, UMD.
They're maybe like what Bemidji State was a couple of years ago, like good records, but could never quite get to that next tier of like we're legitimate contenders for the NCAA tournament berths, but we're good enough to get like an above 500 record every season. We'll beat the teams we should beat, but we can never beat a team that's perceived as better than us. I think
Yeah,
that
or
maybe is
maybe
the
they
accurate
will
thing.
beat a team like that. But what were they the team this year that lost to U Mary or something like that? I feel
They
like they had a bad loss. It was
they
either
might
them
have
or
been, yeah.
Mankato that I remember having a pretty bad loss. But either way, starting the year out with Northern State and Southwest Minnesota State, Southwest Minnesota State probably the same caliber of team as Northern State in the South Division, where there's so many teams above them that are so competitive, and it's just hard for them to really compete at the top of that division. But that seems like an easier schedule, and like we talked about, hopefully that gives us an opportunity to get our feet underneath us and maybe start the season off a little bit better. And then by the time we have our games against Winona State and Minnesota State, which are, Winona State is the third week, then you Mary, and then Mankato before the bye. So these are all, and both of those games against all of our hard games in the first half are at home versus Northern State. Then you go on the road to SMSU, at home against Winona, on the road at UMary, and then at home against Mankato. So that is kind of a good slate right there if you're looking at who you're going to play and where you want to play them at. Then you have the bye, and then you go on the road to
One
Wayne
more thing
State.
too, before I just looked at the schedule. UMary did beat Northern State 27-26 at UMary, but then Northern the next week doubled up Winona State, beating them 42-21. Winona State was an NCAA tournament team the last year who lost to Bemidji State in the first round. So yeah, that inconsistency from Northern State.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what you think of when you think of Bemidji State. It's like, wow, we beat Sioux Falls, I think it was, and then we go and we drop a game to a Moorhead team that we probably shouldn't have lost to or something like that. But yeah, you come out of the bye, you go to Wayne State, and I think that'll be interesting to see whether Wayne State has kind of built something there in Nebraska or whether that was kind of a one-off season, because they, like we talked about, had kind of been in the bottom tier of teams in the NSIC for a while, and then last year they popped up and they were an NCAA tournament team out of the South Division. So that'll be interesting to monitor. Then you come back home, play Concordia St. Paul. On the road to Duluth, of course, we expected that because we knew we were at home last year. Then at home against Moorhead and traveling to Augustana. So kind of a tough slate there to end the season. We'll see if Moorhead's improved at all. And then on the road against Duluth and Augustana to end the year. So you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is late in the season. On paper, it seems to me like it's a little bit harder of a slate than it was last year. You've got so many South games now that you're playing. Earlier on, I remember we only had to play like 3 or 4 South games, when we were coming up as students, because St. Cloud State and Crookston still had their programs. And so you had 7 games in your own division. You played 4 teams outside of your division. So it rotated every year. Now, I mean, we've got how many teams? 3 teams that made the NCAA tournament last year on our schedule. And then Minnesota Duluth was close. Augustana was very close. So it's going to be difficult. It looks on paper right now to be a more difficult schedule than we had this last year. But hopefully, we talked about Brandon Alt coming into his senior season. Can the defense stay as dominant as they were this last year? It's going to be interesting.
Brandon Bolio this year.
Yeah. Hopefully we find another wide receiver to step up. I know that we are a little bit thinner in that category than we were. Obviously, losing a guy like Bolio is going to hurt. So
new running back room too.
Exactly. Because of the transfer of Jalen Fry out of the program, and I think we talked about already they got a transfer in.
Yep. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
It'll be interesting. I mean, I think with the schedule, Bemidji State should still have a winning record. But again, like you said, Winona State is an NCAA tournament team. Northern State is good enough to be within. Honestly, Southwest Minnesota State has a puncher's chance of getting a shot at Bemidji State. I think the only guaranteed wins you could say are UMary, Concordia, St. Paul, and Minnesota Moorhead. So like those are 3, like just you should show up, and if you lose those games, we're gonna rip you the next week on the podcast. That's not to say that those are the only 3 games they're gonna win, but it's just gonna be a lot. They should.
Are they getting rid of divisions next year?
That's a good question.
There's no Minot State on this schedule.
No,
I just noticed that right now. That would be a North Division team.
They might not have. I want to read through this.
Because now there would only be 13 teams, so it wouldn't be a balanced division. But yeah, there's no Minot State on this schedule. So I was just wondering, like, normally we have more gimme games than that when, we don't want to disrespect anybody, but like I said, there's more gimme games than that. But I wonder if they are undoing divisions for next year.
I'm trying to skim through this press release from Bemidji State to see if there's anything that they're going to mention, but there's really nothing. Homecoming will be when the Beavers play Mankato, which will be an interesting development in terms of trying to jump in the lake. I'm looking through here. A bye week arrives on week 6 of the season. That would normally have been Upper Iowa, but the Peacocks are leaving the NSIC to compete in the Great Lakes Valley Conference the second half of the season, playing Nebraska, Wayne State, and really it doesn't seem like there's no mention of that in the Bemidji State press release. So it's a good question on what the NSIC is going to do. Because maybe the move is to get rid of divisions altogether. Because if you look at last year, the North and the South, there's a complete disparity. Bemidji State was the best team in the North, but realistically, they were probably the 3rd best team in the South. If you just go by stuff,
we did, yeah.
I mean, like if you're gonna
schedule,
but
we did finish with the best record, tied with who was that? That it was a Sioux Falls. No, it wasn't Sioux Falls. It was Winona, somebody. But like you said, it was a huge disparity. There's 5 teams competing for playoff.
And it's
chances.
hard to get that judgment because Bemidji State played a lot of those North teams while the South beat up on each other. So I think that's where that gets a little bit tough to rank them.
Exactly. I'm kind of skimming through the football right now, but I can't. They don't have anything for 2023 posted yet. So it's kind of hard to tell, on the NSIC website. Just seeing if I can find anything there. There's not been any news that's been reported since the 26th of January. So I don't know. It's going to be something. I guess keep your ear to the ground on that. We'll try to do the same, and if anything breaks, by the end of this school year, we'll report on it. But yeah, for now, no Beaver Bash on the football schedule.
That's a little weird, but honestly, I think the conference just overall be better for it. Just getting everybody to kind of play everybody and not have to worry about that north and south, because realistically, you're doing it for travel reasons. That's the main reason why you break it up into a north and south. But if you have one less team, you might as well just whatever. And maybe things go back to normal next year when they have a full year, because the games are already scheduled. So with Upper Iowa leaving, maybe the scheduling stuff gets. Bemidji State will go back to like 11 games and whatever. But one last thing on the schedule release, Ian, do you think having one less game, do you think that helps or hurts Bemidji State? Do you think it helps them because it gives them one less opponent, one less game to beat up on themselves? Or do you think that they need that extra game?
I think I don't know, because like you said, now if everybody else is playing 11 games, it gives everybody else a chance. Like now is 8 wins. Like if we lose 2 games, it's pretty much over, because eight
Yeah.
wins is probably not going to be good enough to get you in, especially it depends on who you lose to. This year we might have a good enough schedule, where last year we talked about those are the only 2 games we could afford to lose because of the weak schedule that we played. And now this year it's going to be interesting because we have a better schedule, but do we have enough games? Like, do we have a good enough, if you replace that bye week with Minot State just so you can get another win on the schedule, does that help or hurt you? Just, oh, it's Minot State, so it doesn't matter anyways, but still. So I think it's going to be interesting to look at. It's weird, man. I'm a little bit weirded out that it's only 10 games. And I wonder if it's like a national thing. I haven't heard anything that they're switching to 10 games from 11. I don't know why they would do that. Maybe they just feel like, man, we play 11 games, and then some of these teams like Ferris State that have going to the national championship game, they've got 17 games on their roster or however many it would be. I can't imagine that would be the actual case. But
I'm wondering if it just shocked the system when schedules were already basically, I know they weren't released, but like they're already in place, where they're
yeah,
like, next year's going to be weird, but like give us a year to redo everything and we'll make some changes. This year will be weird, but next year will be back on schedule. Or wild card theory, maybe they're trying to court another team into the NSIC to replace Upper Iowa. That could also be a thing. And this year will be weird, but next year they'll get another team in there. And I don't foresee that happening. I have no sources, so I'm just kind of guessing. So don't, take
right.
that at face value. But I mean, it's interesting because if the schedule hasn't been released yet, I don't know why you couldn't just all of a sudden make everybody play. I don't know. Scheduling is a lot more complicated, I think, than sometimes I give it credit for. But I think Bemidji State not having the extra game, I think that will hurt them for the reason you said, is there's just the margin for error is gone. Like that's one less game. Now, the flip side of it is well, Upper Iowa was an instant win, but also losing to Upper Iowa meant that your season was over. Like if you have a cupcake team like in Upper Iowa, losing to them wasn't actually losing to them didn't help as much as losing to Mankato, because at least you can justify it by saying they're a good team. Now, granted, Bemidji State doesn't lose to Upper Iowa, but like I don't know. I feel like not having that extra game really does hurt them, and that just means that they're going to have to tighten up, because, like you said, 8 wins is not going to be enough to get in to the NCAA tournament. And right now, with Brandon Alt coming back at quarterback, that's the expectation for this team, is to get back to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, you would think. I'm just looking around a couple other teams at the conference. I'm trying to figure out if they've released their football schedule. It doesn't look like Mankato has released theirs, at least to the public yet. I know ours was just released at like 11:30 this morning, so maybe it just hasn't been released for other teams. But I was trying to figure out if other teams had 10, because like what if it's just like, there's an unbalanced amount of teams in the conference. Maybe some teams in the conference do play 11 games, and it's just like, I don't know how that would work, but definitely going to be interesting. That's all I really can say about it at this point. I mean, it's fresh in our minds, so
Yeah.
we'll have to keep an eye on that going forward.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting fall, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a whole bunch when that rolls around. But Ian, let's get into some of the spring sports here. Bemidji State softball had a bit of their weekend plans shuffled a bit. Bemidji State softball added 4 games after the winter weather canceled the Missouri Western State University tournament in St. Joseph, Missouri. The Beavers were planned to compete in 6 games from this Friday to Sunday. Instead, they will travel to St. Cloud for 4 games at the Husky Dome, and they will take on St. Cloud State, Concordia St. Paul, Wisconsin Parkside as well. Some of the teams that they will face off against. So, weekend weather, winter weather, messing up the weekend. But I think the nice part is being able to play some of those games in St. Cloud and get at least some of those games back on the schedule is important.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it happens. Almost every year, you're going to have stuff relocated or moved or canceled, delayed, whatever it is, because of the weather up here in the Midwest. And this isn't even Minnesota. This was Missouri weather that's moving games around. So, congratulations. You have to go to St. Cloud now, but you get to play in the Husky Dome. A couple games getting added on the schedule, keep you warm before inevitably NSIC play starts in late March.
Well, and that's the thing too, is at least if it's the snow, that's the problem, not so much the cold, because if you can clear off enough snow, the softball team will just play games at the Chet. They'll throw some bases down and they'll at least get the games in. Everybody will be freezing, but at least you get the games in. And all of a sudden, when the weather does warm up, you don't have to play 8 games in 4 days or something like that. For Bemidji State, just a few stats here. Sophomore Mariah Stevenson leads the Beavers with a .353 batting average. She has 4 doubles and 2 home runs. Alexa Christensen is right behind her with a .352 batting average. As well, with a double home run as well to her season. Junior Stella Dolan dropped her ERA down to 3.05 after earning 5 wins at the spring games. And last week, she had an ERA of 1.96. Dolan pitched 4 complete games in her 6 appearances, struck out 33 batters with a career high 9 coming against St. Michael's College. Not the only pitcher for the Beavers. But softball is a sport that really does rely more on a very small amount of pitchers. It's not like baseball. Just the throwing motion is different, so you can ride your pitchers a little bit longer than in baseball. But for Bemidji State softball on the season, looking at their full schedule, pulling it up here, 10-8 on the season. Not a bad little start for them. They're 9-7 in that neutral site games, 1-1 on the road. They've played conference opponents like St. Cloud State, like UMD, UMary, Minot, all those teams, but they're not officially conference games quite yet. And I don't believe the conference schedule starts until March 28th. So there's still a couple more weeks until we get into the bulk of the NSIC schedule. But that being said, still a good opportunity for the Beavs to pick up some wins in this situation down at the Husky Dome.
Yeah, that Florida tournament went pretty well. I think we were 3-5 going into that. We went 7-3, so proving us up to 10-8, and hopefully we can, steal 3 or 4 of these games here in St. Cloud and have a good tournament and come in over 500. I think would be the goal going into conference play, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, and so. Looking through into baseball, Bemidji State got their first win last week. It was an 8-6 victory over Malone. And looking at their full schedule as well, Bemidji State 1-14 on the season. And with that win that they got last week against Malone, then they followed it up with a 18-16 loss against Dickinson State. And I think the one thing that has really been the constant for this season for Bemidji State has to be the pitching. I mean, I'm just looking through the score sheet. You gave up 10 runs to Dakota Wesleyan 2 different times. You gave up 11 runs to Walsh and 7 runs to Walsh, 18 runs to Dickinson State. You gave up 10 runs to Southwest Minnesota State, William Jewell. You gave up over 10 runs in 3 of the 4 games. And then Illinois Springfield's ranked number 12th in the country. So whatever, but you still gave up 16 runs to them in 1 game and 14 runs in another.
And 12 in another.
Yeah. So, I mean, whatever. It's not ideal. You can't you can't win if you can't score, but also you can't win if you need to score double-digit runs every single game. The pitching is very concerning for Bemidji State this season. They have not a lot in the tank for them right now, and it's going to make it awfully tough because that was your non-conference schedule, and there's some good baseball teams once you get into the NSIC, especially those southern teams. And again, we talk about all the time the struggle for Bemidji State in spring sports, and specifically baseball probably takes the brunt of it, is the fact of you can't play on your home baseball field until late April, and that's probably going to be the case again this year. So it's really hard to convince guys to want to come up and play baseball when the most baseball you're going to play at the BSU baseball field is going to be if you're playing for the Bemidji Blue Ox amateur team in the summertime.
Yeah, precisely. It's so hard, especially because that's such a big thing. You don't want to travel all the time, especially when you're a freshman and stuff. It's new, it's exciting, you're cool. It's on the road. Oh, we're going on another road trip. Like, cool that. And then after that, I'm sure it gets a little tiring, especially because it's just every year that.
And these are
Oh,
like
look at
8 to
us.
10 hour road trips down to like Sioux Falls and Mankato and all that. These aren't like a couple hours down the road.
Yeah, it's not like you're going down Highway 2 to Duluth or Crookston every weekend. It's like the short end of the stick is going 3 hours south to go to St. Cloud State.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation. Bemidji State, like, there's the built-in roadblock. So as much as it's easy to say, oh, Bemidji State baseball is not doing so great, they should really fix that. I mean, they obviously want to. There is some. Now, it's not an excuse. We're not excuse making for them, but there is some internal roadblocks that really, I don't know if Bemidji State has ever been able to work around, at least in the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to invest in a dome of our own, the Beaver Dome, and then you get a little bit better better luck with the weather, but that's a whole nother investment in itself. And
you need to turn the Chet into a dome.
Yeah, right, and then take away our northern Minnesota advantage.
Yeah, exactly. No, have it just like open up.
Just like, yeah, build the Cardinals stadium, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
How much could that possibly cost?
Not a ton. Bemidji, compared to some of these other Division I college towns, has a very large tax base to draw upon.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, not a great sign. They're pretty much kind of stuck where they are. So, Ian, anything else with the Beavers? We got about a minute left. Anything else you want to roll down?
Nothing huge in the news that we haven't covered. Women's tennis back at it in Duluth, Friday, Saturday with Minnesota Duluth and St. Cloud State on the schedule. They're 2-7. Hopefully they can pick up a couple wins this weekend. Otherwise, I think that's it. Yeah, follow us on all of our socials, all that stuff. We'll be back next week for more Beaver banter.